part of that chapter. I'm just going to hit a few highlights today. And this is about putting that whatever it takes attitude into action. Okay? Putting a whatever it takes attitude, which we talked about last week, how to put that into action. So let me do some background here as we launch. Maxwell says that you really have to have a healthy view of failure. Okay? So we've got to kind of embrace failure, which is weird. But in life, I think, and especially in what you guys are doing in sales, you have two choices. When you encounter failure or setback, people either leave it or you learn from it and improve. So if you leave it, that just means you quit. And hopefully you're not entertaining that idea. In my world, if the pain, I know that people quit for one reason, and that's generally pain and frustration, and they don't have hope. So if your pain level is infinitely higher than your hope level, then eventually people go, I can't take it, and they quit. And so they interpret setbacks and frustrations in selling as failure. Like I knew a guy who was doing really well. We were both rookies, new salespeople, fresh out of training, learning our scripts, doing our best, making demonstrations, calling on clients, and he was killing me in sales. But we came to the second meeting, gone. He was interpreting all of his failure as rejection. He thought they were rejecting him personally. Is that the case? Are people rejecting you personally when they tell you no? No! Good answer. Thank you for shaking your head no, because they're not. It feels like it, but that's not the case. So the better way to handle failure, Maxwell says, is to learn from it and improve. So wisdom, he says, is the process of learning from failure. Wisdom is the process of just learning from failure. And if you've ever been to Euro Disney, who's been there? Euro Disney, Disney World, Disneyland. Have you seen a Disney movie? Did you see Frozen? Okay, whatever. Yay, now we got a response. I knew I could do that. The guy that runs Disney, Michael Eisner, he's the CEO. He said one true statement. He said, failure is good as long as it doesn't become a habit. Yeah, you don't want to, failure is okay as long as you're learning from it, but you don't want to make it a perpetual state of being. It's like, I just fail every day, week after week, month after month. That's just my lot in life. No, you don't want to do that. So, and here's a statement I think is true. I've promoted it before, and when I ever do a full call on neuro-linguistic programming, this is one of the statements where you can coach yourself. This was so helpful to me when I was in sales, and it's this: there is no failure, only feedback. So if you're writing things down, write it down. Otherwise, if you're memorizing things mentally as I go through this, memorize this. There is no failure, only feedback. You are getting feedback. Some of it is how not to ever do this again like you're doing it. But there's no failure. You're just getting feedback. All right. Now, Maxwell goes through what he calls the cycle of success. And this is such a simple cycle. This is how you can be successful in anything. All right. So I'm going to give you the broad 5 steps, and then you can apply it to your world. He says, number 1, you have to test. You test. In other words, you try. That's probably a better way to put it. You try. You test your ideas with action. And here's one thing he says about trying. You know, some people have a really bad month, or your first year, you may have a really slow year in sales. And then in your statistics, let's say you're up by 15 or 20% this next year, and you're like, yay, I'm winning. But Maxwell would say, yeah, you're kind of winning, but you want to benchmark against your potential, not against a failing period. Does that make sense? So some people have a really crappy time, and then their stats the next month or the next year look great. They're up 12%, and it's like, well, they should be up 150% based on how badly they did the year before. So don't benchmark against failure or last year's numbers. Benchmark against what you're capable of. All right? So Let's see. I'm skipping that. This is boring. All right, let's go to number one is try or test in your cycle of success. Number two in the cycle, if you're drawing a circle, that's cool. Number two, he says fail. It's okay. He says trial and error includes the word error. Okay? You can make mistakes. So he says to see your failure as a constant companion of success. See your failure as a companion of success. So if you're just being successful all the time and there's no frustration or setback, you're probably not pushing yourself really hard. Okay? So the struggle that you experience, whether it's your first year in LGFG or it's your 8th year, that struggle that you experience makes your successes more worthwhile. Do you know what I mean by that? He says that life is kind of multicolored. In other words, some of you live in countries where it's almost perpetually winter. You know who you're talking. You know who I'm talking about. Okay, Northern Europe. It's just cold all the time. And then when spring comes, you're like, oh, this is so wonderful because there's a variance in your environment. You know, same thing happens in life. If you go through a period of successes and then a failure, and then you come out into another season of success, it's so nice because you can appreciate the success because you've been so down and out. Has anybody had that happen? Where you're like so frustrated, and then when you're not frustrated, you're like, yeah, life's good. So those successes become more worthwhile when they're kind of flavored by failures. I know that's not encouraging, but I just want to throw that out. And he says this, always have a plan to recover from failure. We're still on step 2 in the cycle. All right. So here, let me read something that Maxwell does. He says, I have my own game plan for dealing with failure. It's the same as the one I have for success. He calls it his 24-hour rule. I like this. 24-hour rule. He says, I give myself just 24 hours to either celebrate a success or cry over a failure. 24 hours. After that, I move on. He says, look, as a leader, I can't let yesterday control today. Isn't that true? Yesterday ended last night, Maxwell says. So I need to look forward and plan ahead. So maybe you can look at it that way. As you can either, if you had a great month last month, you know, if you're going, yeah, I'm so fired up. Look at that. I hit some big numbers. Guess what? Jorgen can celebrate that for 24 hours. Joris, you hear the same thing. 24 hours of woohoo, I won a contest, and then back to it. And then if you just get slammed, same deal, 24-hour rule. I like that. Okay, so step 3 in the cycle. So we've got try or test. We've got step 2 is fail, make mistakes. Number 3, really important, is learn. Learn. Wisdom is the process of learning from failure. So here's a little section here under the learn heading. If you've got the book, I want to read it. This is the formula for becoming an overnight success. If you want to become an overnight success, I'm going to read it to you right now. Here it is. You show up every day, you work hard, you try new things, you fail, you improve, you grow, you face countless challenges, you doubt yourself, you want to quit, but you don't. And you do it all over again. Do this for months, years, decades, and you become an overnight success. Aha! You're like, darn it, I wish there were an easy way. No, there's not. The overnight success thing is never overnight. It always involves the grind, which you're familiar with. All right, so we've got try, we've got fail. You got to learn from the failure. 4, another important step in the cycle, you improve. You improve. You know what you did wrong, but now, this time around, did you get better? That's the big key. How did I improve? What am I going to tweak or change? And then step 5, the final step in the cycle, is try again. He calls it re-entering. So test, fail, learn, improve, retry, re-enter. The moment you re-enter, you start that cycle again. All right? Isn't that simple? Wow. What a cool formula for developing a whatever it takes attitude. Now he does have an alternative cycle, which he calls the cycle of dumb or stupidity, which is this. It's much shorter. Step 1, fail. Step 2, re-enter. Try again. Step 3, repeat. Okay, that's the cycle of dumb. Fail, do it again. Fail, do it. There has to be learning and there has to be improvement. So you have to be willing to, at the end of a week, reflect, think what worked, what didn't, how can I change the things that didn't work, and you jump back in. Okay? Now he says there are 2 types of people starting a new situation or a new challenging area. Again, we're talking about attitude. 2 types of people. One type of person says this: I hope this works out all right. They're like, gosh, I hope this works. Ooh, I hope I get lucky. The second type of person says this to themselves: I am going to prove that this is all right. I'm going to prove that this is right. Right? See the difference? So people had asked me, or I heard this long ago, I can't remember. I'm old. But someone said, look, how do you make the right decisions? And someone said, well, it's really sometimes difficult to make good, right, long-term decisions. So you have to make your decisions right. That's what I'm talking about. I remember my old friend Dan Moore, former president of Southwestern that I worked for, said it's impossible to make like a 10-year decision. I am going to sit down and make a 10-year decision. He said, no, what you do is you make very many short-term decisions, and over the course of time, that adds up to a good 10-year decision. So if you make the next right decision and make it right, then the long run takes care of itself. Does that make sense? Yes, really hard to make huge, massive, long-range decisions. So there you go. Okay, he also says there's another 2 types of people on a slightly different track. He says there's a look-good person versus a get-better person. A look-good person versus a get-better person. So a look-good person, we've talked about this. People that just want to kind of look good on the outside. And this is nothing against you giving your clients beautiful, tailored, custom suits to wear, all right? Because you want them to look good. But I'm talking about in terms of character. Am I consumed with what other people think of me all the time? That's someone that just wants to look good to people. And they're always kind of what we used to call in the old days posers. They were always posing. You know what I mean? So that's a look good person. And then there's another type of person that has a whatever it takes attitude, and that's a get better person. They're focused on getting better all the time. They're never satisfied. If they have a success, again, 24-hour rule, they move on. So the quickest way to fail, Maxwell says, is to love what you're doing and then not improve. Just stay. That is a course for failure. So whatever it takes says, I'm going to constantly strive to improve because I don't want to fail. The quickest way to fail is to love what you're doing, really enjoy it, but not improve on it, to just keep it the same. Okay, so let me close. Some of you are saying, well, how do I get this whatever it takes attitude? Most of you have already developed this, but let me just share a couple quick thoughts. He says there's two things you can do to develop a good attitude. All right. Number one, how many people, first of all, have a gratitude journal? This is one of his suggestions. The gratitude journal, where every day you take a minute to write down things you're thankful for. Revo, good job. Okay. Some of you with blacked out screens, I know you're participating. But if you don't have a gratitude journal, or maybe you had one previously, here's what I would do. You can do it with your phone if you want. It doesn't have to be a book. Or you can just write it down. Some of you journal. So part of your journaling, take a minute in the morning, Maxwell says, and write down at least one thing that you're grateful for. Okay? Just write down one thing that you're grateful for. And it doesn't have to be anything super profound, but just something that you're thankful for. Just write that down. And then at night, he says, when you come in and you're ready to go to bed, add to that list. Add a couple things to that list. And he said, do that for 1 solid month, and your attitude will shift dramatically. When you start to be thankful, I remember reading that the surest mark or sign of a young person becoming mature was gratitude, just being thankful. And so I would encourage you to do that. Otherwise, when you become thankful, your world expands and your ability to give grows. When you are not grateful and you're just a victim of life and circumstance and everybody sucks and things get bitter, you get really small and very self-oriented. So I think this is a great way to start developing an attitude of winning. And that's just to develop a gratitude journal. Just for a month, write down one thing in the morning, add a couple things at night, and just maybe reread those. Those are good. I'll come back to that sometime. I've got a whole little seminar on gratitude we should do. Okay, the second thing he says, which really sounds weird to me, he says, fail on purpose. Okay, so let me explain what he wrote in the book. Fail on purpose. You remember the little cycle of success that we described above, the 5 steps? He says, pick a professional risk this month that you think you're likely to fail at. Now, I'm not talking about something outlandish, like say if your best month has been 12,000 and you say, okay, this month I'm going to do 200K. All right, that's probably a little ambitious, but pick something that you can change, a target that makes you risk professionally, and you're going to try it this month. Something that you're likely to fail at that will test you. Because he's trying to kind of get you to fail so you can go through the cycle and train yourself to see that failure is your friend. Failure, this is another good thing to write down, failure is your teacher. So if you can get the perspective that this is a teachable moment for me, even though it sucks, I mean, no one wants to just go, yeah, I really want to fail this week. Woohoo! No, but when you do that, if your orientation is right, then you can rebound and rebound well. So pick something you might fail at and actually, I'm not saying try to fail, but make it just so big that it forces you to really stretch. And if you fail, that's okay. All right. Any comments, input, questions, stories about attitude? I'm going to give you, yes, de-mic yourself. Well done, Tisa. And then I'll finish with a quote. Go ahead.
I had about the gratitude journal. I heard in the Darren Daily to do one as well. And I did one last year for maybe 3.5 months, but it wasn't for me. It was for someone I loved. So every day I would write like what I was grateful for or thank them for. And then it was for my mom. And when I met her on Christmas, I gave it to her as a present. So this is something that was really nice to write because I got to reflect about how great of a mom she is, how I feel, and yeah. So
wow.
I would recommend it.
That is a great idea. Okay, everyone clap. Did you hear that applause? That's a really good idea. I mean, talk about getting your mind off yourself. I mean, I assume your mom received that well? Yeah,
she cried.
Oh, good. That's what we want. We want to make it. But what a cool thing. Yeah, that's a variation on a theme. Wow. I just think that's a great idea. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else can you top that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Revo?
That as well, and it feels really good.
You're locking up, friend.
Can you hear it or no?
Barely. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say I have received something like that, like a list of that, and it feels really good. So I recommend people to do it.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Yeah, if you're like, well, I don't have anyone to be thankful for, well, then send me a list. You can do that if you need a friend. I sure do. But yeah, it's a great thing to not be grateful internally for yourself, but to create that as a gift and give to someone else. What a cool thing. All right. I don't know if I can top that, but let me finish with a quote, all right? And then I'll let you guys go to work. This is a quote from the book, and it's from Chuck Swindoll. He's an author, a great author. He's written a number of books, but there's a little excerpt from his book on the right attitude. But listen to this. It's kind of long, so don't try to write it down. It's one of my favorite quotes. He says, "The longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude to me is more important than facts. It's more important than the past, than education, than money, than circumstances, than failures, than successes, than what other people think or say or do. Attitude is more important than appearance, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a company." Did you hear that? It will make or break a company. It will make or break a church, a home. The most remarkable thing is that we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we embrace for that day. He goes on to say, "We cannot change our past. That is a truth. Nor can we change the fact that people will act in a certain way. We also cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play on the one string we have." I like that. The one string we have, that is our attitude. We have an instrument that has one string on it that we have control over it, and that is our attitude. He says, "I'm convinced that life is 10% of what happens to me, 90% how I react to it. So it is with you. We are in charge of our attitudes." So true. So I will be finishing this call with the rest of the song from the Kinks called Attitude. I will be submitting this to Aaron for our next playlist. So good job. Enjoy your week. Have fun. Go fail.